hold it closer. Okay. So when I was asked to talk today, I was asked to talk about my military service, which I thought might be a little boring for me and you. I will talk some about my military service, but this day is about you. This is about veterans, and I wanted to thank you so much for your service. Everybody in the room that's a veteran, I wanted to thank you so much for your service. My military service really is a culmination, and who I am is a culmination of hearing my father talk about his military service, hearing my grandfather talk about his military service. And I know when I turn on the TV now, many times I want to cry. You know, you feel like giving up because you see death and you see hate and you see things going on in the country that you may not agree with. And I think that the country, and you hear it said all the time, would be much better if many of our young people went into military service. I know that for me, it was life-changing. I grew up on stories from my World War II veteran grandfather, my grandfather on my mother's side, Papa J.C. Horn. He was a machine gunner in World War II, and he was part of a three-man crew. And I've been fortunate enough to interview him about that, and I've always liked to hear stories from my elders and stories from veterans. So I had this, he did not at all paint World War II as idealistic, but I somehow, as a young man, you romanticize those stories and you think you want to go off and fight your war, or at least I thought I did. And war is obviously not a pretty thing or a great thing to be heralded, although everyone in here who has participated in one or has been in the military period is a hero. So when I turn on the television and I see those things that I don't like, and I was thinking about what to talk about today, I wanted to talk about really what's great about this country. This country is a place where you can be anyone, start from nothing, and have upward mobility. It is a free society. It is not without challenges by any means, but it is a place where we can try to be equal, and where we are supposed to be equal. And that's what I believe that all of you fought for, is that equality and that freedom that we all share. I have my wife here today and two of my children, and they're able to grow up, two of our 6 children, and they're able to grow up in a free society because men and women like you out there today served in our armed forces and fought for those freedoms. And again, I think if you're working in Nebraska at an Air Force base, you are as much as a part of the freedom effort and war effort. If you're a cook cooking in the galley, you are as much a part of the war effort or the freedom effort, peacetime or wartime, as if you were on the front line fighting in combat. Because everybody plays their part. So, as I heard my grandfather J.C. Horn talking about World War II and his stories, you know, my eyes got big. I love that man so much, and he passed away when I was 13 from cancer, from throat cancer. Like many others of that day, he was a smoker. And the other stories, so I idolized him. So that's probably why I wanted to go in the military, one of the reasons. Another reason is my father, Ted Mcintyre, who is a solid rock in our family, who is one of the most dependable people I've ever met. And he was in the military during Vietnam. However, he served in San Diego on what's called a subtender in the Navy. So he worked on submarine optics, periscopes, pulled those and fixed those and put them back in. I always was astonished at the discipline, the honor, that those men that were so influential in my life had. And they would tell you that part of that came from their parents, part of that came from military service. So in thinking of how our world could be a better place today, why it is as free as it is because of you, I think, and it sounds cliche, but the world would be a much better place if our young people were to have more military experience and structure. I needed that when I was a young man. I was not ready to go off to college and be free, and I don't think that would have worked out well for me. So I enlisted in the Navy when I was very young. And I came home, I didn't tell my parents. I came home and told them at the dinner table that I had joined the Navy. And when asked what duty station that I wanted to go to, I put down number 1 as San Diego, because that's where my father had served, had been based out of. I spent 4 years in the U.S. Navy in San Diego. First, I went to Great Lakes, Illinois for boot camp. How many veterans do we have in the room today? Everybody remember boot camp pretty well? I remember boot camp like it was yesterday. I remember you being yelled at. I remember the food. I remember marching. I remember it being so cold in January and February in Great Lakes, Illinois, right outside of Chicago, that I had on, the thermal underwear and dungarees and a jacket, and it didn't matter. It felt like I had nothing on, and it cut through my clothes like a knife. But still having to march around and go PT and do all these things. And, I wonder if that experience wouldn't be beneficial for my children. Wouldn't be beneficial for many kids out there who are yearning for structure, for a father, for discipline. And I think it is a great place to learn those things. And I think the world would be a better place if those kids received that. I remember the good things. Those are some of the physical, mental pictures I get. What I really got out of boot camp was confidence. I learned that I could be a little tougher than I thought I could be. I learned that I could listen to somebody yell at me and understand at some point after I got over it a little bit that person really cared about me. And that person wanted me to do well. And that person wanted me to be a better man and to grow into a man. And for you ladies out there, I commend your service as well and fully understand. I have 4 daughters, 2 boys and 4 girls. And I want them to be as disciplined, as tough, and I understand they can contribute the same as I can or more. And there's many, many women throughout history who have always served to keep our country free in some capacity. And I appreciate that as well. So females out there who served, thank you so much for your service. Females out there who had husbands in the military, you're in with them, so thank you for your service too. So out of boot camp, I learned that I could also lead. I was given the opportunity to be second command of our division of about 80 men. And the way I did that was we were there for a couple of weeks, and we were trying to go through and find our AROC. Does anybody out there know what an AROC is in the Navy? Well, at my time in the Navy, an AROC was the person who marched everyone around. And that's important because you have to stay in step, you have to get from one place to another. And I was a southern boy from Shelby, North Carolina, who grew up in a Baptist church. No offense to my current Presbyterian brethren and sisters that are over at the table over there, but grew up in a Baptist church singing in the choir. I had a bit of soul, I thought, and I got tired of hearing these guys hack it up and not do a good job. So I volunteered. I said, look, we were off miles from our base, if you will, or where we lived, from our ship, they called it. And I said, look, let us march us back. I'll do it. And I said, you'll never have to find somebody else. And they didn't. So I did a decent job. And that allowed me to be second command of boot camp and gain rank coming out of boot camp. So it gave me experience. It gave me leadership experience. It gave me confidence. And that's something that I drastically needed at that point in time. Who out there wants to hear me sing? My wife's saying no. I know that. Just a little bit of what it might sound like for me to march a Navy group around. I bet you we have. Do we have anybody who did that for their platoon or their troop or whoever it was going through? I see a hand back there. I see a couple of hands who know how to do it. And the different branches of services do it differently. And they have different chants and things. In the Navy, we would mainly sing. So I'd count to 4. Just a simple 4 count. It might not be 1, 2, 3, 4. It might be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, and there's other many different variations on that we would do to march people from one place to another. What's that? 10 minutes. Oh, okay. So anyway, I had a ton of fun in the military. I met my beautiful wife Stephanie in the military. I got to serve in the Middle East for about 1.5 years and out to sea. It was not all roses. It was during some of the Desert Shield and things that were going on. And I'm sure that I know that people in this room have horror stories about war. Closest I got that I can remember, closest I ever wanted to get, was being made to shower in gas masks and sleep in them. And because we were afraid Saddam was going to drop chemical weapons somewhere close to the boat, to the aircraft carrier that I served on. And that's a pretty tense experience because you don't know what's going to happen. You start thinking about what that stuff might do to you. And I know from my grandfather's stories about World War II, I know hearing from Korean War vets, Vietnam vets, there are a lot more horrifying stories out there about war, and Gulf War vets that were on the ground there. So I can't imagine what some people in this room have been through. But I applaud all your efforts and thank you so much for your service. I got a ton out of the military. My family would not be where it is today, my wife and those 2 children, if it hadn't have been for the men and the women that supported the effort that served in the military in my family. That's made us a country. That's made my family a family as it is today. It's made our country a place where we can be free. And I, again, cannot imagine what our country would be like if more of our children were able, given the opportunity, to serve in the military. I received education, discipline, guidance. Maybe talk to your kids about this. Talk to the grandkids. I think it's a good idea. I'll tell you, the military paid for 2/3 of my undergrad education while I was in, which is huge. And then I had the GI Bill, and my wife can tell you, how did that come in handy when I was in law school or trying to make that decision on whether I could go or not? I couldn't have gone if it hadn't been for the GI Bill. My dad would not have been an engineer if it hadn't been for the GI Bill coming out of the Vietnam War, because they couldn't have afforded it. So the military does a ton for us. Men and women who serve do a ton for us. There is an absolute, I hear an alarm going off and I'll wrap it up. There is an absolute tragedy going on with veterans coming out of the military right now. The suicide rate for veterans coming out of the military right now is atrocious. What can we do to stop that or to help that? I see my how many is it per day?
22 per day.
22 veterans per day commit suicide. Most of those are young veterans coming out of the Gulf War era. I mean, that's an absolute tragedy. My father-in-law is here today, Evan Thompson, and he called me one day and told me that I was in the American Legion, okay, essentially. He is a commander of Post 82 here for American Legion, and that is an amazing group of men and women, right, for the auxiliary, that give me an outlet. People that I go there, I eat dinner, and everybody's swapping stories. I mean, that's a sense of, I think, of your generation's teamwork, identity, networking, understanding the value of relationships, of talking about things back and forth, that I don't think that younger generations have as much of. And I think if we plugged in younger generations into the American Legion, VFW, other types of groups like that, I believe those numbers would drop, because those young men and women coming out of service would be able to identify more and talk more about what they experience with like-minded individuals who have similar experiences. So if you see a common thread in my life, it's really the people that have influenced it. The only reason I went into the military was because I knew it was such a good option, because it did so much for people in my family. And as I look out and see the great men and women that have built our society, that run our town, I can only say thank you for your service. Thank you for making me the man that I am today, and so many others around you that you affected throughout your life, and especially your families, I know, would tell you the same thing. So thank you so much for your military service, and thank you for allowing me to come say just a few words today about my military service and how I really, really look at how it affects everyone around us, not mine, but yours. How the people and their stories, I've interviewed a lot of people in this room about your military service because it's so important. And I like hearing about it so much. So the more you can tell people about it, the more you can influence people, it really does make an impact, and it really does help society. And I thank you so much for keeping us free and giving us a great country, okay? Thank you very much for allowing me to come serve you today. Have a great day.